It's the classic episode where Tasha Yar returns to the Enterprise only to have the ultimate Clerks moment. A war with the Klingons. I'm not even supposed to be here today. This is a review of the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Yesterday's Enterprise. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know why Tasha Yar isn't supposed to be here, be warned. Spoilers beyond this point. Look, a lot of stuff happens in this episode, a lot of big reality-bending stuff, but before we even get into that, we have to acknowledge the most important development to come out of yesterday's Enterprise, and it happens in the very first scene. Worf is sitting in 10 forward when Guinan walks up, serves him a glass of something, and says, "Here, drink this." And he does, and he really digs it. He's like, "Now that's a warrior's drink." And Guinan says, "It's an Earth drink called prune juice." Worf's taste for prune juice. One of my favorite oddball character quirks in Star Trek. The fearsome Klingon warrior who orders prune juice begins in this episode. As if it didn't already have enough going on. While Worf enjoys his first taste of prune juice, a scary space whirlpool appears out of the window. Guinan's like, "Oh great, another one of these." But once she gets a good look at it, this scary space whirlpool seems to bother Guinan a lot more than average. On the bridge, Worf arrives and takes his station, and Data informs Picard that the space whirlpool is some kind of time displacement. A ship emerges from the time whirlpool, not a space whirlpool. It was never a space whirlpool. I'll hear nothing more about this imaginary so-called space whirlpool. And as the ship appears, reality aboard the Enterprise seems to shift. Suddenly, the lighting's a lot more dramatic, and everyone's uniforms are different, a bit more military-looking. No one seems aware that anything has changed. They carry on as though it's always been this way. The other ship is still exiting the time whirlpool. Picard asks for sensor readings and looks to his tactical officer, but instead of Worf, it's Tasha Yar. She's been dead for like 2 years at this point, but I gotta say, she is looking good. Tasha identifies the ship that's coming through the wormhole, Registry NCC 1701C, the previous ship to carry the name USS Enterprise. The ship has been heavily damaged, and the time whirlpool it came from appears to be unstable. Riker calls Dr. Crusher to prepare an away team to go over there and help them out, but Picard is reluctant. This is a ship from 20 years in the past. If we go over there and help them and then send them back where they came from with knowledge of the future, we could alter the course of history. Yeah, wouldn't it be something if that happened? Picard agrees to allow an away team to visit the Enterprise C, but he tells them not to mention what ship they come from and to avoid any future talk. Riker leads the team to the bridge of the other Enterprise, and they meet Captain Rachel Garrett, who notices right away how evasive these newcomers are being about who they are and where they come from, but Riker convinces her to come along to their sickbay, because Captain Garrett is pretty banged up. The team also pulls this guy out from under a pile of debris. He's Lieutenant Castillo, helmsman of the Enterprise C. As repair and recovery efforts get underway on the Enterprise C, Guinan walks up to Picard like, "Hey, can we talk a second?" They go somewhere private, and Picard's like, "So, what's up?" And Guinan says, "None of this is supposed to be this way. Apparently the Enterprise is a warship instead of a ship of exploration. And we've been at war with the Klingons for the past 20 years? I can't put my finger on exactly how or why, but everything has changed, and it's wrong, and it's because of that ship from the past. It has to go back to its own time in order to put everything right." Only one problem with that. After talking over the situation with Captain Garrett in sickbay, and eventually telling her that, yes, okay, her ship has passed through a time whirlpool and come 20 years into the future, Captain Picard is convinced that sending the Enterprise C back to its own time would be a death sentence. When the time whirlpool opened up 20 years ago, the Enterprise C was on the wrong side of a 4-on-1 battle with some Romulans. Sending the ship back would return it to that battle, and there's no way it could possibly survive. They don't have long to decide whether the Enterprise C is going back where it came from or staying here to join in the fight, because sensors have detected a squadron of Klingon ships approaching, and they'll be here in, I don't know, like 9 or 10 hours. Space is big. It takes a while to get places. Picard asks Guinan for something more substantial to convince him that the Enterprise C has to go back through the Whirlpool and be destroyed, but all she can offer is her certainty that all of this war and all the death and devastation it has caused was never supposed to happen. Picard still isn't convinced. Guinan goes back to 10 Forward, and Tasha is there with Castillo from the other Enterprise. The two of them have been getting to know each other as they've worked together to get the Enterprise C back up and running. When Tasha orders some rations for the two of them, Guinan gives her a weird look. Tasha's like, "What's wrong?" And Guinan's like, "Nothing," and slides away. Tasha and Castillo have a little chat at the bar, and she refers to him as Lieutenant, and he says, "Hey, come on now. I won't salute if you won't. Your name's Tasha, right?" She's like, "Yeah." He says, "Everybody calls me Castillo, except my mother. She calls me Richard." Tasha says, "Okay, Castillo." He says, "Actually, I think I'd like it better if you called me Richard." Richard. Mommy! A bit later, Picard has a meeting with his entire senior staff where he says, "So here's the thing. I've been talking with Guinan about this, the bartender, and she thinks the Enterprise C should go back into the time whirlpool. And I've been considering it, and now I kinda think that's what should happen." Riker's like, "But won't that just kill them all? They'll get blowed up by all the Romulans they were fighting when they left. Wouldn't we be condemning the crew of that ship to a meaningless death?" Data pipes up with, "Actually, their deaths won't necessarily be meaningless. The Enterprise C was in that battle with the Romulans because it responded to a distress call from a Klingon colony that was being attacked. Klingons hold honor as their most sacred ideal. If a Starfleet ship were to be destroyed defending a Klingon outpost against Romulans, that would be considered a highly meaningful act." Picard's like, "There, see? They go back in time, the ship is destroyed, they all die, but their honorable deaths in defense of the Klingons might be enough to prevent this war from ever happening. That's what we're doing, I have decided. Let's get these time travelers killed! Dismissed!" Over on the Enterprise C, Picard has to pitch this plan to Captain Garrett, who up until now has been under the impression that her ship and crew will be remaining here and joining the fight against the Klingons. Picard tells her, "Okay, look, I'll level with you. The war isn't going well. The Klingons are kicking our asses. In 6 months, we may be forced to surrender. One more ship won't make a difference now. But 20 years ago, before this all started, one ship could have changed history." Garrett agrees. Picard returns to his Enterprise, but Tasha, who is here helping with the repairs, stays behind to say goodbye to Castillo. They say a heartfelt farewell, but then, before Tasha can actually leave, the Klingons show up and attack. It's only one Klingon ship, and it unleashes a quick assault before cloaking and flying away. But that quick assault does plenty of damage. There's an explosion on the Enterprise C, and Captain Garrett is killed. Picard, Riker, Tasha, and Castillo have a meeting where Riker's like, "Okay, now we absolutely cannot send that ship back into battle with a bunch of Romulans. History never meant for the Enterprise C to meet its fate like this. They won't stand a chance without their captain. All due respect to you, Lieutenant Castillo." And Castillo's like, "With all due respect to you, sir, even though I'm now the only surviving senior officer aboard the Enterprise C, we're still ready to take the ship back through the time whirlpool. It's our mission, it's what Captain Garrett wanted, and as for the Romulans, I eat pieces of shit like them for breakfast." You eat pieces of shit for breakfast. Castillo and Tasha bid another bittersweet farewell to one another in the transporter room, this time with a kiss. Tasha's like, "You don't taste like you eat pieces of shit for breakfast. That must be some mouthwash." Something's been bothering Tasha since Guinan gave her that funny look in 10 Forward, so she goes back to talk to Guinan about it, and Guinan says, "Oh, what that was, you're dead in the original timeline. I don't know how or why, but I know it was an empty, pointless death. So that's why I've been kind of weird around you lately. We aren't even supposed to know each other. You're not meant to be here." Tasha goes to Captain Picard and requests a transfer to the Enterprise C. Picard's like, "What?" Tasha says, "I talked to Guinan." Picard's like, "Oh, Jesus, what did she say?" Tasha's like, "She said I'm supposed to be dead. And if the Enterprise C succeeds in its mission and this timeline changes, my death will remain as it was. Guinan says I died for nothing. I'd like my death to count for something." Picard says, "Oh, fine, transfer approved. Good luck." Tasha reports to Castillo on the Enterprise C. He's not thrilled to see her at first, what with the doomed nature of their mission and all, but he accepts what she's doing, and they do need her help, so he welcomes her aboard and orders her to take her station. More Klingons arrive, and the fight is on, the Enterprise D holding them off while the Enterprise C makes for the time whirlpool at roughly the speed of a sloth on Benadryl. I know I said space is big, and it takes a while to get places, but it's right there! Come on! The Klingons beat the hell out of the Enterprise D, though the good guys do manage to blow up one of the Klingon ships. The Enterprise D's warp core is damaged. A breach is imminent. There's an explosion on the bridge that kills Riker. Picard jumps up out of his chair, leaps over the railing, and personally mans the tactical station, returning fire to the Klingons as best he can. All seems lost until, finally, the Enterprise C disappears through the time whirlpool, and suddenly, everything's back to normal. The lights are back on. Everyone's in their normal uniforms. Worf is back at tactical, trying to hide his growing alarm as the full effects of the prune juice begin to assert themselves. Guinan calls the bridge. "Hey," she says, just randomly checking in for no reason. Is everything all right up there?" Picard says, "Yeah, everything's fine here. Is everything good down there?" And Guinan says, "Yeah, everything's fine. Thanks. Sorry to bother you." She hangs up. Then she sits down across from Geordi and says, "Geordi, we need to talk. Everyone else has switched back to the original timeline. Why haven't you?" No, I'm kidding. What she actually says is, "Geordi, tell me about Tasha Yar." The end. I feel like this is one of the least suspenseful reviews of a Star Trek episode I've ever done. Does anyone really expect me to give it a negative review? This is one of the best episodes TNG ever produced. Shit, this is one of the best Star Trek episodes ever produced. Period. It's not a series-defining statement piece like The Best of Both Worlds or Deep Space Nine's In the Pale Moonlight, and for me, it doesn't have the emotional impact of DS9's The Visitor, my personal choice for best Star Trek episode ever, but it mingles comfortably in that elite company nonetheless, no matter which way you look at it. Yesterday's Enterprise is damn near a perfect episode. The central dilemma of the show is crafted to allow for complexity, but is itself fundamentally very simple and easy to understand. A ship from the past has traveled to the present and changed history, and for things to return to the way they're supposed to be, that ship needs to go back. It's clear, there's no technobabble solution necessary. The Enterprise C doesn't need to re-enter the temporal rift and initiate an inverse neutrino burst from the main deflector dish. It just needs to go back through. There's a lot of symmetry in the plot, which I appreciate. Some of it is obvious. We begin and end with Guinan in 10 Forward, with basically the same shot, in fact. Guinan sitting down across from Worf in the beginning, Guinan sitting down across from Geordi in the end. But there's also the symmetry between the hopeless situation we're told the Enterprise C is going back to when it returns to its own time, and the hopeless situation the Enterprise D finds itself in as it defends the Enterprise C. The Enterprise C was outnumbered 4-1 in a battle with some Romulans. The Enterprise D is ultimately outnumbered 3-1 in a battle with some Klingons. And there's the added layer of the Enterprise D eventually being rescued from its hopeless battle with the Klingons because the Enterprise C went back and reset history by defending Klingons against the Romulans. It all just fits together very nicely. Beyond the simplicity of the scenario and the structure of the plot, the episode does a fantastic job of establishing a totally new reality that feels immediately genuine and lived in. The subtle changes of the uniforms to make them appear more martial, stronger collars, black cuffs on the sleeves, belts, immediately communicate that this is a different world, as do the lighting changes and the various set alterations. Picard's captain's chair is elevated. The ready room and observation lounge have been transformed into much more functional-looking spaces with maps, and tactical displays instead of their more benign and inviting typical decorations. 10 Forward is now a mess hall instead of a relaxing place to enjoy your off-duty hours. It's all extremely well done and helps to make this altered reality convincing and immersive from the moment we arrive. Speaking of that moment, the transition into the altered reality is handled beautifully. We get the close-up of Picard watching as the Enterprise C emerges from the rift. There's a flickering transition effect as we switch to the same shot of Picard, only now in the alternate timeline. Picard steps aside to address his tactical officer, and where only a moment ago we saw Worf standing, now there's Tasha Yar. It's a fantastic reveal that immediately kicks the episode up a notch. Not only are they in some kind of altered reality, but Tasha's back, and starts the episode off on an exciting note that sucks you in right away. The subtle changes in characterization we see in the main cast are also crucial to pulling this whole thing off. I just did a Trek Actually video about evil twins, and this isn't that. These aren't the shadow versions of our heroes. This isn't the mirror universe. These versions of the characters are darker and more serious than what we normally see, but only because of the circumstances they've been living through. Captain Picard is still the same man we've always seen him to be, principled, thoughtful, compassionate, but he has a harder edge because his version of Starfleet has been at war for 20 years, and his service has been defined by that war, not by adventure and diplomacy and exploration. Of course, the three most important characters in the episode are not members of the regular cast. There's Guinan, who's a recurring character, Tasha Yar, who used to be a regular but has been gone since season 1, and Castillo, who we've never seen before and ain't gonna see again. All three characters are great here, and all three of their actors do top-notch work. As Guinan, Whoopi Goldberg gets to show a more determined, forceful side. Usually Guinan is a fairly passive character. She listens, she dispenses advice, she shows other characters another way of viewing whatever their situation is. Here, she's exactly the opposite. When she goes to talk to Captain Picard, she's not there to listen. She's there to talk, and she tells Picard that if he knows what's good for him, he'll listen to her. One of the potential weak spots in the plot of the episode is the notion that Picard, no matter how much he trusts Guinan, would choose to send an entire ship full of people to their certain doom based on her intuition alone. But I think Goldberg sells it well enough for me to believe it. Plus, just in case you don't fully buy that Picard would act on Guinan's advice alone, Data eventually provides a more practical and concrete reason for the Enterprise C to go back through the rift, because its honorable defense of a Klingon colony against a Romulan attack might have been enough to prevent the war they've all been fighting. It really is a well-written episode, isn't it? When talking to Tasha Yar, however, Guinan has a very different mood. She's uncomfortable, reluctant to engage. It's like she's talking to a ghost. Something Whoopi Goldberg would know all about, am I right? Huh? Lieutenant Castillo is played by Christopher McDonald, and holy shit, does he knock it out of the park. He's mainly there to provide some additional motivation for Tasha's arc as her tragic star-crossed potential lover, and his chemistry with Tasha works very well. Their flirtation/romance happens quickly, but it doesn't go any further than you might imagine it would if all this was really happening. They clearly like each other. They spend a lot of time together for a well-justified reason. They get to know each other. There's the tantalizing possibility of what they could be if only there was time. They share one kiss, and that's really as far as it goes. But it plays. I believe it. McDonald excels in those moments of romance and vulnerability. I make fun of that, "My mom calls me Richard, and I'd like it if you did it too" line, but truthfully, that moment works. And it works because of how Christopher McDonald plays it. He's not saying, "I want you to call me Richard because you remind me of my mom." He's saying, "I want you to call me Richard because only the people closest to me call me that, and that's how I feel about you." McDonald also does a good job selling Castillo's courage and determination. When Captain Garrett is killed and Castillo is faced with having to lead the Enterprise C back on his own, he bears up to it like the trained professional he is. He doesn't react with swagger or false bravado. He doesn't hesitate or cower. He tells Picard and Riker, I have good people, and we can do what needs to be done. And I believe him, and I admire him for it. Before I move on, I don't want to neglect Trisha O'Neill, who plays Captain Garrett. She doesn't get much, since her character is killed off to raise the stakes, but in her few scenes, she gives us enough to conclude that Rachel Garrett is a formidable captain. Plus, years before Kate Mulgrew led the cast of Star Trek Voyager as Captain Janeway, this episode establishes that Captain Picard's immediate predecessor as captain of the Enterprise, or an Enterprise at least, is a woman. And this episode originally aired in 1990, so all you mutants who complain about how woke Star Trek is nowadays can fuck off and die. The real star of the episode, obviously, is Denise Crosby, who returns to reprise her role as Tasha Yar. Crosby left the show because the writers seemingly had nothing for her character. Now she comes back. It's the best Tasha Yar story ever written, and Crosby seizes the opportunity and turns in a beautiful performance. Everything that made Tasha a good character is here. Or at least a potentially good character, because Denise was correct. The writers in season 1 had no idea what to do with her once they had her. We see the blend of toughness and vulnerability, Tasha's devotion to duty, but also her openness to closeness and romance, and what an arc she gets in this one. To us, she suddenly reappears as a result of Enterprise C-related timeline shenanigans, but from her perspective, she's been here the entire time, serving on the Enterprise, fighting this war with the Klingons. She meets Castillo, falls in love, but it turns out he has to go back to his own time, where he'll definitely die in battle. That's tragic enough, but then Guinan tells her, by the way, you're not even supposed to be here. You died in the original timeline. That would probably trigger an existential crisis for you or me, and it probably does for Tasha too, a bit, but what it ultimately does is bring her life into focus. That's the real stroke of genius in this episode as far as Tasha is concerned. It brings her back, drops multiple layers of tragedy on her, but then gives her a way to use those tragedies as an opportunity for resolution and redemption. The first time she died, it was for nothing. Not this time. This time she gets to go out fighting and saving history in the process. And even though the timeline is restored at the conclusion of the episode, we still get to end on Tasha because Guinan remembers, or is at least aware that something has happened, and asks Geordi to tell her about Tasha. Because even though their relationship was pivotal in the events of this episode, they never actually met. The episode does a lot of stuff and does all of it very well, and that in and of itself is a minor miracle because if you pay attention to the credits, you'll notice that there are 6 credited writers. That's usually an indication that the thing you're about to watch is going to be a mess. The original story is actually a combination of 2 pitches. One from a spec script submitted by Trent Christopher Ganino about the Enterprise D encountering an Enterprise from the past. One from a story by Eric Stillwell about botched time travel changing the timeline to bring Tasha Yar back to life. TNG executive producer Michael Piller combined the 2 pitches into a single story. Then Piller assigned the actual writing of the episode to 4 writers, Ira Stephen Bear, Richard Manning, Hans Beimler, and Ronald D. Moore, with each of them taking responsibility for a different section of the script. Then Piller did a final uncredited pass to shape what they'd written into a shooting script. Somehow, they managed to successfully Frankenstein this script into not just a coherent episode, but an all-time classic. Incidentally, the reason they had to write the episode like that, with 4 writers working on it simultaneously, is because the production of this episode was in a serious time crunch due to the limited availability of both Denise Crosby and Whoopi Goldberg. I've never heard this specifically from anyone in the know, but I assume that rushed production is the reason why Geordi is wearing the wrong uniform in that last shot. I'm guessing they shot that on the same day as they shot scenes with LeVar Burton playing Geordi in the alternate reality, and when it came time to get this final shot, they either didn't notice that he was still wearing the alternate timeline costume because they were in such a hurry to get it done, or they noticed but decided it wasn't worth the time it would cost for him to change costume. Again, just a guess on my part. If anyone knows different, please leave a comment. The only potential MVP of this episode I haven't mentioned yet is the director, David Carson. Yesterday's Enterprise was the second of 4 TNG episodes Carson would direct. He also directed 4 episodes of Deep Space Nine and the movie Star Trek Generations, but I won't hold that last one against him. Carson's direction on yesterday's Enterprise is phenomenal, especially when you take into account how rushed the production was. He's not only able to tell this story in a way that is clear and lands with the necessary impact, he tells it with style and grace. I already mentioned the symmetry of beginning and ending with the same shot and how well the initial reveal of Tasha Yar is handled. There's a second reveal of Tasha late in the episode that's almost as good. When Castillo is back on the Enterprise C getting the crew ready to return into the rift, and the camera tracks sideways to reveal Tasha standing in the foreground a few moments before she announces herself to Castillo. This is a complicated episode. The drama comes from its premise and its characters, but it also has sudden bursts of action and excitement, and Carson pulls it off so smoothly that when you watch it, it feels effortless. I am quite sure it didn't feel that way while they were making it. This term gets thrown around way too much, but it fits in this case. This episode is iconic. It's got great writing, great performances, it looks great, and think how many singular moments from this episode have etched themselves into the brains of Trekkies for the last, God help me, almost 35 years. Hell, this isn't even really a Captain Picard episode, but there are so many classic Captain Picard beats here. When he yells, "Not good enough, damn it, not good enough," that's this episode. When he says, "Let's make sure history never forgets the name Enterprise," that's this episode. When the Klingons demand that the Enterprise surrender, and Picard says, "That will be the day," and vaults over the rail to take the tactical station, that's this episode. It's a classic in every sense. Those are my thoughts on yesterday's Enterprise. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Join me next time as we continue this batch of reviews of episodes about alternate timelines with an episode from the 5th season of Star Trek Deep Space Nine titled Children of Time. That's next week. See you then. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.